everyone, Kelly here, and today I want to share with you the new releases for 2021 that I have read this month in April. And I actually was really on top of reading new releases this month, and I ended up reading 7. And I would have to say that most of these I really enjoyed. I only had one dud, and then the rest of them were all 4- and 5-star books. So that's pretty good. So I'm excited to share these with you. And so in case you haven't heard of them, or you are waiting to see what other people thought, or at least what I think, I would like to share them with you. So I'm going to start with the one I didn't like, and then I'll get to all of the 4- to 5-star books. So the first one that I didn't enjoy, which was really sad, was the only middle grade. No, there is one more middle grade later on, but I was expecting to really like this. This is called Alone by Megan E. Freeman, and this is a survival story, and it's a girl as our main character surviving, and so I was hoping that this would be kind of like a modern Hatchet, but with a young girl as the protagonist, and so I was really excited. This is written in verse, as you can see, so, you know, it should fly by really fast, but I kept putting this down because I just didn't really think this worked. First is that I like books written in verse, and so I didn't have any problem going into it with that style, but I didn't think the style really did anything for the book, like having it written in verse. A lot of times when I read a book written in verse, it kind of lends to the feeling of the story, or like it's like about the person's internal thoughts, and like maybe it's a little more poetic. And you know, since this is like a girl that is by herself surviving, I thought it would be more of that, like about her internal thoughts, and it is, but it didn't really give me a full glimpse into her internal thoughts. Like, I kept thinking, what's going on right now? I don't really feel like I'm connecting to her as a character, or what's happening around her. It felt very generic. And it almost felt like this style was chosen because the author didn't want to give a lot of details, and I feel really bad saying that because I've never read anything else by this author, so I don't know why she chose to write it in verse. Maybe from a lot of other reviews, people said that it was to really feel that feeling of loneliness and isolation, but I just didn't get that. I felt like it was just too minimal, and that I wasn't really connecting with the main character at all. So basically what this is about is our main character, I'm trying to remember her name, is Maddie. Her parents are divorced, and she wants to have a sleepover with some friends, and so she coordinates that, like, she tells her mom that she's staying at her dad's house, she tells her dad she's staying at her mom's house, and then her and her friends are supposed to meet at her grandmother's apartment. Her grandparents have an apartment in the town, but they only use it at certain times of the year, you know, like they're snowbirds and stuff, so they aren't using their apartment right now, and they were gonna have this like secret sleepover. But then her friends get sick and don't show up to the sleepover, but she just decides, I'm gonna have some time to my own, not have to deal with my parents or my like half siblings or anything like that, I'm just going to have my space. So she's staying alone. Her parents both think she's with each other, and then something happens in the town that causes a mass evacuation, and everybody leaves overnight, and when she wakes up the next morning, she is alone in the entire town. She can't find another person and doesn't know what happened. And okay, so first of all, my problem was that didn't make any sense to me at all. Like, when you read a lot of the books like Hatchet or Island of the Blue Dolphins, like some of those kind of classic middle grade survival stories, they make sense. It's something like a plane crash or a boat, you know, went ashore or something like that, or sunk, and that's why this person has to survive on a deserted island or something like that. Those make sense to me, of like, that's why they're in this situation. But I don't understand how there could be a mass evacuation and she doesn't wake up. I mean, and there is like a moment where she hears that something's happening outside of the apartment, but goes back to sleep. But I'm sorry, if there was a mass evacuation of an entire town, wouldn't there be sirens going on and megaphones and tons of noise of people moving? Like, this would not be a quiet experience. It would take hours, right, to evacuate an entire town. Doesn't make any sense. It like, the suspension of disbelief was too much for me. So there's that part that just from the very beginning really just, I didn't like the way it was set up. And then we get to her surviving in this town alone, where she is hoping that her parents are going to come back, that the people, whatever caused people to evacuate, that eventually her parents will realize that she's not with the other parent and they will come back for her. And so she stays there and survives for, I'm not gonna tell you how long, obviously that would be spoiling, but she survives on her own with this like dog that is her neighbor's dog. They're alone, and it's just basic survival things, you know, finding food, finding water, keeping warm or whatever, you know, all that stuff. And it just wasn't that exciting. It seemed like it just wasn't, because she's like in a town, it's pretty easy to find food and water. Like, it's not like being deserted on like on an island where you have to kill animals and stuff like that. You know, there are grocery stores with food in them that she can go and like get. So it just didn't make sense to me to write the story this way. And so I ended up giving it 2 stars. I don't know, a lot of other people really loved it, so don't take my word for it. If you like a survival story and you think you can get past that whole like, sorry, people are slamming doors in my house. If you can get past that whole unbelievable situation and just enjoy a basic survival story, maybe you would like the style of writing and all that stuff. But for me, it just didn't make sense and I didn't like it. And now let's move on to books I did like. So these are my 4-star books. I'm going to start with the one that I don't have a physical copy of, and that is 2 Truths and a Dare by Ashley Elston. I got this as an e-arc from NetGalley, and I was really excited about this because this is the sequel or the companion novel to 10 Blind Dates, which was like a Christmas romantic comedy, and I loved it. 5 stars. I read it both this last Christmas and the Christmas before, like 2019 and 2020, because I just loved it. It was a lot of fun. And this one follows the cousin of the main character from that book. So we see a lot of the same characters we saw in this one. And this one is about, what's her name? Olivia. So that's the cousin of the girl from the first one. And she is approaching her graduation day, and she's one of those kind of like people that always gets straight A's. She's about to be like salutatorian, as that's what it's called when it's the second person in her class, and she has everything like lined up. She's all excited, ready for college, and then she gets this message from her principal that says that actually she's missing a gym credit, that she took an off-campus gym credit at this like golf place because she wanted to fit in all of her special like AP classes, and they did not get the form from the golf coach saying that she passed that golf class, and so she's not allowed to graduate until she gets this form signed. And of course she's panicking because she's supposed to give a speech at graduation day, so she has to go through this whole thing to make sure she graduates, because that would be really embarrassing to not get to graduate on graduation day because you missed your physical education credit. So yeah, so that's kind of the setup. And you know, she's got the big boisterous family, and and they are still in it a little bit, but it's mostly just her kind of figuring out how to get this credit. There is also a, you know, fun summer romance in there. There's a lot of golfing. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I just think that I don't even enjoy golf, and hearing the concept of the story doesn't really like pull me in, but there's just something about Ashley Elston's writing that is just really consumable for me. I've read 3 of her books now, and all of them I think I read within a 2-day period. There's just something about her writing that is really compelling. I like the cute relationships that she has in her books, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. You definitely should read 10 Blind Dates first if you're going to read this one. But if you liked that book, I would suggest going into this one, but it doesn't have as much of the like family antics as the first one does. So just keep that in mind, that it's mostly just about this girl and the things that she's going through to get to graduate and stuff like that, and a cute romance. And those are basically the main plot points. This book comes out on May 4th. And next I have another romance, but this is an adult romance. This is Float Plan by Trish Dollar. And this one was more of a slow going romance because the main focus is on the issues that the 2 people that, you know, are in the romance are going through, and how they're kind of growing together and then falling in love, you know how romance works. So this is about Anna, who her fiance died by suicide, I think a year before the book starts, and so she's dealing with that grief, and then she gets a reminder on her phone that they were about to leave for their sailing trip that her fiance had planned this whole trip that they were going to take together, and she just decides to go and take the trip by herself because she's still dealing with a lot of grief, and she just thinks that it'll be great to follow this dream that he had to do this sailing trip. Well, a couple days into the sailing trip, she quickly realizes that she is not experienced enough sailor to do it by herself, so she hires this professional sailor to come with her. And Keen is also going through some issues because he has recently lost part of his leg, and so he has a prosthetic leg, and he has spent most of his life being a sailor, but a lot of boats and like jobs won't take him on as a sailor anymore because they think that he, with his disability, won't be able to perform his job up to par. And so he's suffering with kind of like the loss of his dream of being this professional sailor his whole life. And so like they're both going through kind of grief in their own way. And like I said, it's really slow burn romance. I thought it was cute. I'm one that kind of likes this level of sexiness in their books. So if you have followed me and you know, I don't really like it like a ton of sexy times. So this is definitely more on the light sexy times, because since it is such a long slow burn, we don't get to that kind of stuff till towards the end. So if you just want kind of a romance that takes a while to get there, that get to know each other more, and they're dealing with their own issues, then I would suggest this. Next, we have a thriller that I've heard several people talk about, and that's Every Last Fear by Alex Finlay. And this is, at the beginning, we are following a guy named Matt Pine who is in college. He's had a night of like, drinking and partying. His girlfriend just broke up with him, and so he was kind of like dealing with that. So the next morning, he's, dealing with this hangover, and this FBI agent just shows up and says that most of his family has died from a gas leak while vacationing in Mexico. So like basically his whole life is falling apart. And this is the first time that his family has been in the news because his brother has been in jail for I think like 7 years at this point for murdering his girlfriend back in high school. And his brother's case was also made into like a documentary on Netflix because he says he's innocent, and so there's a lot of people trying to get him an appeal and stuff like that. So he's been in a documentary, so the family has become kind of famous, and now almost every other member of the family has died except for the two brothers. And so I say we follow Matt Pine at the beginning because this follows a lot of different perspectives. We follow some of his family members that have died like beforehand, so we see kind of the lead up to the vacation. We're following Matt, we're following the FBI agent that has his case, and so like we're just following a lot of perspectives and just kind of getting piece by piece what happened 7 or 8 years ago, however long ago that first murder happened, and what happened to his family in Mexico. And I did think this was a really enjoyable thriller. It kept me interested the whole time. I think having different perspectives and going back and forth in time kind of helped me stay invested and revealed enough like little things little by little throughout the book to keep me invested. But I will say that I didn't find any of the reveals or twists in this surprising. Like by the time a reveal was given, I had already been given enough like breadcrumbs along the way that I figured it out. And so like I figured out the solution right before the character figures it out, you know what I mean? So I didn't find any of the twists and turns like all that surprising, but I did think they all were interesting. So I would try another book by this author. I did find this entertaining, 4 stars. If you just want a thriller that'll keep you entertained for a couple days, I would suggest that one. And the next 3 books are all 5-star books. I loved every single one of these books. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the other middle grade book I read. And this is Amina's Song by Hena. And this is the sequel to Amina's Voice. And I had given that first book in this duology 5 stars when I read it a couple years ago. I just love her writing. I love the way she writes contemporary middle grade. Contemporary middle grade isn't even my favorite genre inside of middle grade. I usually love fantasy, but there's just something about her writing that I just love it. I love following Amina as a protagonist and like the kind of morals and things that come up in these books. So good. I can tell you the setup of this because I don't think any of it's a spoiler for the first book. Basically, Amina is Pakistani American, and at the beginning of this book, her and her family are visiting their family members that live in Pakistan. And so like we see a little bit of that. We see some of her family members and her time in Pakistan. And then she's coming home for the beginning of the school year. So they did their vacation over summer. It's the beginning of, I think it's like 7th grade, maybe somewhere around that. And, she's all excited to tell all of her friends about her trip and her connection to Pakistan and everything, but it seems like a lot of her friends just aren't that interested, and so she's a little disappointed that people don't want to talk about it because it was really impactful for her. And then she gets this opportunity in her history class. They do this like big like kind of living history project where every kid gets to pick somebody real from history or current time who has made some kind of impact in the world. And so she's like, this is the perfect time for me to tell everybody about Pakistan. So she chooses to be Malala and tell Malala's story to, you know, her class and the rest of the school. And so she's really excited because that is someone who is from Pakistan. And so she can talk about the country. But things don't go the way she thought because people kind of focus on the negative parts of Malala's story instead of the empowerment towards education for girls. And so she is trying to figure out a way to show people all the beauty of Pakistan without focusing just on the negative parts that are shown in the news. And I love this book. I love the family in this. I love the friendships. She makes a new friend in this, and a lot of the things that come up in this new friendship are really excellent. It also focuses on her music, which was a big part of the first book. We've kind of follow along on that thread of her and her music, and then just this like really connection with her heritage and with Pakistan was just so beautiful. I would highly recommend both books. The first book focuses a lot on just like keeping your identity and your heritage, but also, you know, her being Pakistani and American, like combining those identities. And this one really focused on spreading out that, like teaching other people about her heritage. So I would highly recommend both these books, and I'm excited to read the other middle grade novel that I own by Hena, which is more to the story. I definitely want to read that one now that I just absolutely love this one as well. And then next I have Across the Green Grass Fields by Seanan McGuire. This is book 6 in the Wayward Children series, and I actually have not read all 6 books or all the 5 before this one because I heard that this one you don't have to have read the other ones. This is a good starting off point. So if you haven't read any books in the series, you could start with this one instead of starting with Every Heart a Doorway. It's perfectly fine. There's no characters in this that were in the other 5 books. And so it just depends on what you want to start with. If you want to start with them in the real world or in the fantasy worlds, because this series is all about kids that get pulled into different worlds that kind of like are ways for them to feel accepted and be who they truly are. Like they are sent to a world that really fits with them. So this book is really short. They're all novellas, so I don't want to give a lot away. So I'm just going to say follows a girl named Reagan, who she always kind of felt like she knew her place in her group of friends in school, and she was always trying to stay in the status quo, didn't want to rock the boat so that she could still be part of her group of friends. And then something happens that kind of makes that really hard, and she finds out that maybe her friends aren't really like her true friends and things like that. So she's going through some really hard stuff at school. And right as all of that stuff is happening at school, she finds a doorway and she goes through it and finds herself in this world that is full of like equine kind of mythical creatures. So there's centaurs and satyrs and kelpies, things that I hadn't heard of. I actually did a lot of like researching. Every time a new character came up in this, I was like, I need to look this up. I need to learn about the myth. So that was really fun for me. That's part of why I gave it 5 stars, because I just loved learning about all these magical creatures. I would like go on these rabbit trails on the internet and like really look up all of them and like what their myths are and their history. So I was having a lot of fun just diving into all of these mythical creatures and then, you know, heading back into the story and getting absorbed in Reagan's adventure in this equine type land, and like all of the like friendships she makes and just where she finds her place in the world. And I just loved it. I love the way this book ended. I've read, I think, 3 of the other books in the series, and all of them kind of left me desiring more. Like I didn't absolutely love, I liked them all. They were all like, all the ones I read so far, I think I've given 4 stars. This is the first one I've given 5 stars because I just thought it wrapped up great. I loved the entire story. It felt more like a fable, almost like it definitely has like a purpose and an arc that it just finishes up. So I think that's why it's a perfect beginner book in the series. If you're not sure that you want to jump into the beginning ones that are all kind of connected to each other, this would be a great one just to dip your toe in and find out if you like this series at all. Though I have to say I've heard a lot of other reviewers that love the series didn't like this one, but I loved it. I absolutely adored it. 5 stars. I would definitely probably buy a copy of this and read it again because I really loved it. And the last book I want to talk about is The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon. So I've only read one other Jennifer McMahon book. I read The Night Sister, which is up here, and I really loved that one. It was like plenty creepy enough that I was like super invested in reading it fast because it had these creepy, possibly supernatural things in it, and I really enjoyed the characters and was fully invested. And so I was excited to pick up more by her. I do own The Winter People, and for some reason I just never picked it up, and I own one other of her books. I don't know why I waited until this book came out before I read more by her, because I love this, and now I'm definitely going to read the other 2 books I own by her. She just blends this perfect amount of like creepy and scary moments without being too much for me to handle. I'm kind of a wimp. I can't take any kind of like blood and gore or too many jump scares in a book, things like that. So I don't usually read adult horror books for that reason. But this one was perfect for me. A little bit of creepiness to like give me that ooh, and like a little bit, you know, like in that, is it supernatural, is it not kind of feeling. I love that, but it didn't go overboard. So if you're kind of a wimp like me, Jennifer McMahon might be a great author for you. This one also kind of does that, like a lot, it seems like a lot of her books kind of span 2 time periods, and that's what this one does. So we are following, in present time, we are following a woman named Jax who has a twin sister. Now what's her name? Lexi. So her, at the beginning we see that Jax is getting all these phone calls from her twin sister, and she's not answering the phone because her and her sister have been kind of estranged for a while. And then the next day, after getting all these mixed phone calls, she finds out that her sister died overnight and drowned in their grandmother's pool, like on her grandmother's estate. And then we have another timeline in 1929 where we are following a woman named Ethel who is married, and everybody's like asking when they're going to have children, but they're having some infertility issues. And then her husband decides to take her on this vacation to this hotel that's kind of in the country to get her mind off of not getting pregnant and all that stuff. And while they're there, they find out that the spring waters at this hotel have these kind of magical rumors around them that people say they can make a wish while they're visiting the springs and get their wish come true. And so it's kind of, that timeline is all about like, what would you do in order to have a child, to keep your family safe, all that. And then in our current time, there's a lot of like Jax trying to find out what happened to her sister, how did she end up dying, and then kind of more into their family history of the estate and things that have happened at this pool. And so there's this great atmosphere in this pool where her sister died that's so like creepy and mysterious, you know, and it's like, you know, this dark pool, like the water, it's a natural spring pool, so the water is really dark and you can't see very deep down. And yeah, I just loved that creepy atmosphere. You know, there's a lot of like, is it, what's going on? Is this man-made, you know, like ghost kind of thing, or is there really something supernatural? I just loved it. I was very invested in both storylines and how they end up connecting and all that stuff. I just found myself invested the entire time, loved the story, flew through it, and excited to read more by Jennifer McMahon. So those are the 7 new releases that I read in April, and I just want to show you real quick what might be coming up next time. I did start Game Changer by Neil Shusterman, and I got it about a third of the way through, something like that. And I just don't know if I like this one. I might DNF it, but I'll let you know in May. I'm going to like maybe give it 50 more pages. I'm just not enjoying it, which is sad because I do like Neil Shusterman. But so yeah, I'm just gonna give it a little bit more, and I'll let you know in my May new releases video if I ended up finishing or if I quit that one. And then I still have a January release. I have If I Disappear by Eliza Jane Brazier, and I was gonna actually read this one this month, and I started the audiobook, but then I did not like the audiobook. And so I'm going to pick up the physical now that I have it from the library. So I am going to pick up the physical copy. I just wanted to listen to it on the audiobook since it has a podcast in this. But at the very beginning, it's in second person, and that was too hard on the audiobook. So I'm going to just pick it up and read it physically. And then I have a few that I just got from the library. I got The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris, and I've heard this one is pretty intense, so I didn't pick it up yet in the last couple weeks that I've had it from the library, but I hope to actually like get in the mood to read something a little more intense before May. And then I have The Push by Ashley Audrain, and I don't know really anything about this. I heard about this on the Currently Reading podcast, and it just sounded really interesting, even though it's like one of those books where you don't, like even the synopsis doesn't really give a lot away. So I don't really know what this is about, but I see this picture like everywhere on Instagram and people talking about it, so I'm going to try it. And then I have The Women of Chateau Lafayette by Stephanie Dre. This is historical fiction. It's huge, but I am buddy reading this one in May with a group, and so I already know I will going to be reading it in May for sure. So hopefully, since there's only 5 and one of them is a potential DNF, that I will get through all of those and you'll see my reviews next month. If you're interested in any of these books and want to talk about them more down below, I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.